thank you very much for joining us today. Good morning or good afternoon. I would like to start by welcoming you and thanking you for attending today's event. So my name is Bartłomiej Małczyński. I'm EU specialist in Europe Direct Kraków Center, a substantive associate at the Institute of Public Policies, student at the Center for Comparative Studies of Civilization, Jagiellonian University. And our organization, the Institute of Public Policies, is an independent, non-governmental think tank organization based in Krakow. Our main endeavor is to generate innovative ideas, provide practical expertise, and shape the mindset of the younger generation. With extensive experience in the implementation of grant projects and public contracts, we actively contribute to the democracy field in Poland. And let me introduce our co-host and our esteemed guests. Today's co-host is Katarzyna Szybalska, human rights educator and activist, Master of Asian Studies, student at the Center for Comparative Studies of Civilization, Jagiellonian University. And our guests, Madam Shirin Haq, Bangladeshi women's activist and founder of Naripokkho organization, PhD Marek Moroń, Polish lecturer, advisor, diplomat, South Asian specialist, academic lecturer at the Center for Comparative Study of Civilizations, Jagiellonian University. And so firstly, I'm going to ask Mr. Marek Moroń about a brief introduction to the discussed topics related to the recent developments in Bangladesh. Mr. Moroń, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Good afternoon to everyone in Dhaka. Good morning to everyone in Poland. The eyes of many people, also in Poland, are today on Bangladesh. Genuine expression of peoples. We are witnessing the genuine expression of people's will, which is materializing in your country. Our knowledge of the past may not be sufficient to visualize the future of Bangladesh, to visualize what will happen as a result of this going on revolution. It may not be an extrapolation of what we know. Emotions of the freedom struggle of 1971 and its heroes seem to be replaced by something else, only we don't know what that will be. We don't know, and therefore we are likely to make an error of judgment, judging the present events and predicting the future of Bangladesh. It is therefore a great opportunity for us to listen to the voice from Dhaka, the voice of Madam Shirin Haq, long-time activist of opposition, founder of the feminist movement in Bangladesh, and a human rights fighter, activist known in many countries of the world. Shirin, I am very glad that you are with us, and we shall listen to you with great interest so that we have knowledge about what is going on in Bangladesh, not just from media, not from the journalists, but from the activists who participate and who are the witnesses, living witnesses to events which are taking place. Thank you very much, and I'm sure that the answers to the questions that my colleagues will put forward will be a great contribution to our understanding of what is going on in Bangladesh. Thank you.
Thank you very much for this short introduction. So I'm going to ask you, Madam Shirin Haq, at the very beginning, please elaborate on the recent developments in Bangladesh from the women's rights activist perspective. Bangladesh transition is called an historic opportunity for inclusive governance anchored in human rights and rule of law. And what is your opinion on this matter?
First of all, I want to start by paying tribute to the hundreds and thousands of young people who were on the streets protesting, and the protest then finally turned into a popular uprising, people's uprising, and led to a regime change. So I want to thank them for their sacrifice. Many young lives were lost, And at the same time that we are ecstatic about the change, about getting rid of a dictator who run the country for 15 years in a tyrannical manner. After getting rid of the tyrant, we are ecstatic, but we are also very traumatized by the number of young people we have lost in the process. And many are still in the hospitals, injured with bullet injuries, and many have had to be amputated. And we don't know what the fate will be of all those who are in hospital, because even yesterday somebody died in the hospital after being in the hospital for so many days. So there are still people with very serious injuries in the hospital. Now, in terms of the movement itself, it started off as a very disciplined and peaceful movement against quota reforms. These are quotas for government jobs. And the students were saying no to quotas and saying yes to merit. The jobs should be merit-based and not quota-based, because the amount of quotas was exceedingly high. And so a lot of people who qualified for jobs could not get jobs, whereas people were getting in through quotas, whether it's a freedom fighter quota or a women's quota or a disability quota, etc. So the quotas they were wanting to have removed were actually mainly the freedom fighter quota. These freedom fighters are no longer, they are of the age where they are no longer seeking jobs. So the quota has been transferred down to 2 generations, their children and grandchildren. And this was felt to be very unfair. So similar with the women's quota, I'm personally against the women's quota as well, because I think the people who qualify to get into government jobs are already privileged to some extent. The people who need access are not going to get there, not going to get to the point where they can use a quota. So what is needed for women is really uplifting and measures that will uplift them as a whole, and not only for government jobs. So our country has seen a lot of progress on women's education and a lot of progress in women's employment. So I'm hopeful that that trend will continue without any quotas. There is some justification to call for affirmative action, and that is on the agenda, I hope, of this new interim government, that they will actually consider affirmative action as a policy and make sure that when affirmative action can be applied, it is applied. Not only for women, but for the disabled and for third gender people. In terms of the situation then, as I said, what started as a peaceful movement very quickly became not peaceful, because the government let loose its party goons and thugs who were on the streets fully armed and attacking the young students. And the first death that traumatized the entire nation was Abu Saeed on the 16th of July. And that death, I think the way he was killed, because he could not believe he would be actually shot at point blank. It was at a point blank distance he was shot. He stood there with his arms stretched out, thinking that, impossible, nobody will shoot me. But the police went ahead and shot him, not once, but 3 times. And he, although after the first bullet he kept standing, after the second bullet he kept standing, after the third bullet he fell down. And then a friend of his tried to get him to safety, but he was already declared dead. So this is the situation in which many other young people died similarly of bullet wounds, not only from the police, but also from the Awami League ruling party thugs and goons who were out on the streets, their students' wing and their youth wing. So there was a lot of bitterness had built up over the years anyway, but these last days of violence made everything even worse. The people were aggrieved for 15 years. People were aggrieved. There was no free speech. There was no freedom of expression, and people were aggrieved anyway. So these last few days of violence then made that even worse, exaggerated that even further, exacerbated that even further. So it is in this situation, it is in this context that the regime change took place when the dictator finally agreed to resign, and she fled the country. After that, there was a period of mayhem and anarchy, which is not unusual, which is to be expected after such a situation. And that was disturbing because some of it targeted minorities, some of it targeted Army League people, anybody known to be Army League. And even among the minorities, 80% of them were targeted not because they were minorities, but because they were belonging to the ruling party or supporters of the ruling party. But this tendency to attack minorities is a disturbing one. And I think this is one which we haven't really dealt with or coped with in 54 years. So this is something that upset us as well. And in terms of my own organization, as an organization, we decided that the best thing for us would be, because we are registered with the government, we cannot risk the registration, that they can cancel the registration. We decided the best thing would be to stand for upholding the fundamental rights in the Constitution. So we had human chains where we stood with the fundamental rights, holding up banners and placards with the fundamental rights stated in them. And that was one of our first points of activism. Secondly, now we are trying to locate people who are injured in hospitals who need help, and we are collecting funds. Many Bangladeshi students who are studying abroad, who are studying in the USA or the UK, are sending us money for treatment of injured persons. So we are working on that right now. So that is more or less the context. If you want to ask the next question, then that will help me.
After the government resigned on August 5th, incidents of looting, arson, and violence against religious minorities were reported. And the interim leader of the Bangladesh, Muhammad Yunus, has delivered his first major government policy address, and he promised to support the Rohingya community seeking refuge in the country. And how this statement reflects the new chapter in the Bangladesh history and politics related to the marginalized groups, and how, from the political perspective, the approaches to these kinds of social problems will be changing, and how new rule in Bangladesh will impact the feminist movement in the Bangladesh.
I think the message from the interim government is very clear. They intend to be an inclusive government. They intend to not encourage any form of intolerance, whether it's religious or any other kind, ethnic minorities, religious minorities, or any other kind of minorities. So this is one clear message from the interim government, that they are not going to put up with any form of intolerance, any form of violence. And so far, after the initial period of anarchy, when there was no government for some time, once this government was installed, the anarchy has come to an end. And with the help of the army, it has come to an end. And hopefully we will see more stability in the next few weeks. This interim government is focusing on reforms, because that was the demand of the students, was reform the state. So they were not simply asking for getting rid of one dictator to be replaced by another, or getting rid of one regime to be replaced by another. They were seriously talking about reforming the state, which means reforming the legislature, reforming the judiciary, reforming the administration, and reforming governance altogether. So this is the agenda for the new interim government. It's a big, challenging agenda. And it will take time. It will not be done in 2 months or 3 months. It will take at least a year or more to introduce these reforms or to start walking towards those reforms. To achieve the reforms will take even longer, but at least to get started on them. That is the point. And I think this interim government is very well suited for that, in the leadership of Dr. Yunus, who is a man well known for his integrity and well known for his modesty and for his humbleness. And he will, hopefully, he and his colleagues in his cabinet will be able to achieve what we all, the expectations of not only the students, but the people.
Thank you. And I would like to ask you to present the characteristic of Bengali society in terms of women's rights, discrimination, and these marginalized groups, and citizen participation as well.
Well,
Maybe.
participation was phenomenal. The number of women who participated in the protests was actually unprecedented. And in fact, on the first night, it is the women students who came out first. They broke the curfew and they came out first, and then the male students joined. So in terms of the participation and leadership, the young women were there in full force, and my hat's off to them. They have taught, I think we have learned a lot from them. We have learned about courage, we have learned about determination, and we have learned about determination and direct action, going for direct action. So this is something that I totally appreciate and laud, and I have my complete appreciation for the young women students who led the path, really. And it was older people like us who joined in, but the leadership was very much theirs. So in that sense, I think the expectation was that they would be represented in the interim government as well. And there is some disappointment at that. There's some disappointment that the young students, two students are in the cabinet, but both of them are young men. None of the women are represented in the cabinet. And this is a point of disappointment. And hopefully tomorrow we are meeting with the president, with the head of the interim government, Professor Yunus, and we shall bring it up with him tomorrow, that he needs to include in his cabinet some of the young women who are on the streets day and night. In terms of the context in which these women are, why this is unprecedented and so courageous is that the context is one in which women are very dominated in our society. There's male dominance is very, very strong, and there is overrepresentation of men in every sphere. So women are underrepresented and women are dominated. In this context, for the young women to come out in big numbers was quite a breakthrough, I think. Because the context is a very conservative one, and context is one in which male dominance has priority over everything else. So in terms of the legal aspects as well, women have fewer rights than men, especially in relation to family law and in relation to citizenship law as well. So women have fewer rights in law. Women suffer discrimination in economic sphere as well as social sphere. Women suffer disparity in wages and in income and wages. So there is a general pattern of disadvantage that women suffer simply because they are women. And I hope that the example set by these young women during these protests will have a ripple effect and will actually bring about some longer term changes.
Please tell us something about the history of your organization, Naripokkho, its main ideas, and please describe how the organization works.
Naripokkho was founded in 1983, so it is 41 years old. It was founded as a volunteer group of women who wanted to create a third option, an independent option, independent and autonomous option within the movement. because the movement was divided mainly by political party women's groups or by women's charity groups. And there was, Naripokkho wanted to create a third option, which was an autonomous women's organization, where the central point would be women's rights and equality. And that is why Naripokkho was started in 1983. And our main agenda is equality and human rights and dignity. So these are the three main things in terms of what we are working for. But within this, we have many different programs. We have programs on women's health and reproductive rights. We have programs against violence against women. We have programs for women's human rights. We have programs for women's economic rights. So we have different programs under the overall overarching theme of equality, justice, and fairness, non-discrimination, etc.
Thank you very much for this introduction. And I'm giving the floor to my friend Katarzyna Szybowska.
Thank you very much. Since we've moved on to the topic of women's rights and feminist movement, I would like to ask you what has been some of the biggest challenges that feminist movement has been facing for the last couple of decades. You've obviously mentioned the underrepresentation in the economic sphere as well, and overall male dominance, but what are some of the biggest issues and challenges that there are still waiting to be tackled?
I think the biggest issue is the conservatism around equality, that most people do not perceive equality to be a just demand, and they think it is an excessive demand on the part of women. So that equality is not seen as a just demand. This, I think, is the main challenge we face in terms of people's perceptions and social views. And the second is, of course, as I said earlier, the male dominance and male overrepresentation of men in every sphere makes it difficult for women to push in. And that is a major challenge as well. But there are challenges which have to do with unequal laws. There are challenges which have to do with policies which are not women-friendly. There are challenges which have to do with programs where women are not inclusive programs, where women are not included. So there are challenges at many levels, laws, policies, and programs.
Thank you. And has the feminist movement evolved in Bangladesh since the leadership of Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina?
No, I think the movement started before Hasina. And during Hasina's time, yes, she was very vocal about women's empowerment. And she also patronized a lot of women's programs. So in that way, she actually contributed to women's advancement to some extent. But whatever contribution she made was minimized by the violations that happened during her rule. The violations were complete impunity for the perpetrators because they were connected to the ruling party, or even, rapists got impunity because they were connected to the ruling party. So this is something that, on the one hand, she contributed to women's empowerment, talked about women's empowerment, but did not bring about any fundamental change in the laws, in the unequal laws. So for example, women have unequal inheritance, unequal right to guardianship, and so on and so forth. So we have, for example, we are signatory to CEDAW, but with reservations, or even on Article 2, which is about the intent of the government to bring about equality. So these are things that have been problematic. The women's movement has been there for long before Hasina, and it has been trying to fight these issues, but I must say with not a lot of success. We have been fighting for so many years, but very little success.
And looking at the social political situation in Bangladesh, what would you say are the Naripokkho's main priorities at the moment?
Main priority right now is to hopefully be able to influence the interim government to take on some of those topics, some of those things that Hasina government did not take on in relation to equality in law, formal equality, but also substantive equality in terms of de facto measures that will bring about enabling conditions for women to participate, to be included, and to be represented. So we hope to be able to lobby the interim government for those changes, and hopefully they will be responsive to that.
Thank you. And you have mentioned that the student riots have been sort of tipping point in this revolution. So could you tell me what role do youth and especially Gen Z play in shaping society and driving change in Bangladesh? And also, have young people been contributing to the advancement of gender equality and women's rights?
I think, first of all, they were not riots, they were protests. The student protests were definitely both men, young men and women were there, large numbers. And I think that is to me, that gives a message that young women who have been on the streets, who have fought, were not going to give up easily. And they will demand their equal place. And so that I have a lot of hope in the youth, and hopefully they will pave the way for the rest of us. And in terms of the role they can play, they are already playing a big role, but they have not been represented in the interim government. So this is something that I mentioned earlier, that this is something that worries me, that why are they not represented in the interim government? So hopefully we'll see some change, and we'll see that young women are also included in the interim government. That will give them a space and give them a voice that they deserve.
Okay, and could you tell me what opportunities and hopes are now emerging in Bangladeshi society, not only for women, but for other minorities that have been discriminated against? And what do you wish for in the future for your society and the minorities?
Because the whole movement was called anti-discrimination movement. Although it started as a quota reform movement, it very quickly became an anti-discrimination movement. So there's a lot of hope among people who have been traditionally discriminated against and who are disadvantaged. There's a lot of hope that this is the moment, this is a historical opportunity to make anti-discrimination a priority agenda and remove some of the discrimination that they have suffered traditionally. So this is, I think, raised a lot of hopes. Well, so this will also be a big challenge for the government, but hopefully they will respond to this challenge in a positive way.
Thank you very much for those answers.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I would like to ask Mr. Moroń to short summary of our meeting.
Since we still have a few minutes of time, with the kind permission of you, Mr. Batomi, I would like to ask one question referring to my introduction. My introduction: what will happen to the historical memory of the freedom struggle of 1971? Well, I have seen many films, very many films, that it appears that the heroes of 1971 are no longer the heroes. So how is this going to be in future? What will be the narration? What will be taught? What lessons will children have in their books in the school about 1971, about Sheikh Mujibur Rahman?
This is a difficult question right now, because everybody in the street is talking about the second independence. They are considering this a second independence, and they are calling it a second independence from 15 years of dictatorship. And so in a way, 1971 has been overshadowed by 2024. And so right now, the issue of 71 is taking a backbench, taking a backbench. And I don't think it is being shelved. I don't think it will be shelved because I think it is a matter of things calming down, things settling down. And 1971 will be very much part of our history, very much part of our memory, and will be very much part of our history books as well. Now, Sheikh Mujibur Rahman is a difficult question because this is the first time people have been felt free to talk and criticize Sheikh Mujibur Rahman, because he had become a demagogue, as you know. No criticism was allowed. And during his daughter's rule, no criticism was allowed. So all the misdeeds during his regime has not been talked about. And so now people are coming out in a big way, coming out with a vengeance, really, and talking about Sheikh Mujib as another dictator. And during whose regime, a lot of people lost their lives because of difference in political opinion, because of the intolerance that he had introduced. So this is something that will continue for some time, I'm sure. But I'm sure there will be a time when things will calm down and there will be some balance between the Sheikh Mujib, who led our liberation, whose name the liberation war was carried out, although he did not actually lead it because he was in prison in Pakistan. But it was in his name that the war was carried out, the liberation war was carried out. So there will be a balance between the Sheikh Mujib, who was the father of the nation, and the Sheikh Mujib, who was the autocrat and the dictator. So I think, a little bit like Kemal Atatürk, I think. You know, there are many points to appreciate, but there are also points to criticize.
Yes, just to add a little, because that really is a question which I posed to myself. The freedom struggle and the person of Mujibur Rahman and other freedom fighters, 1971, this was and is perhaps the source of big emotions. Now, if this emotion, these positive emotions about freedom struggle, independence, if this is going to be put aside, then there is no vacuum. In that vacuum of emotions, some other emotions will come. My question is, is there even a is there a possibility that in a couple of years we will be facing the phenomenon of Islamic Republic of Bangladesh?
I don't think so. I don't think so. I think there is a solid, what is the word? There's a solid basis on which Bangladesh stands as a country of many religions, many ethnicities, and diverse groups, diverse language groups as well. So I don't think Islamic fundamentalism can take over. The maximum votes they ever got was 4%. So, but there is, of course, a possibility, because in the popular uprising, the followers of the Jamaat-e-Islami, which is the Islamic party, followers of other Islamic parties were also very much actively participating in the protests. So they have some claim on the fruits of the revolution, on the fruits of the uprising. So this is how this is going to be tackled by the interim government. Is it going to be interesting to see how they'll tackle it, to what extent they will compromise and to what extent they will not compromise. But I personally think there is no possibility of that happening.
Thank you very much. Thank you. So, well, summarizing our meeting, well, first of all, we have got more knowledge we know more, and this is not the knowledge coming from TV or coming from media, but we've got this knowledge from the person who was active in the opposition and who is active now, is not only the witness of what is happening in Dhaka and in Bangladesh, but is also a participant and co-creator of these events. Well, it is very interesting news that tomorrow you have a meeting with the head of the interim government on the subject of participation of young women. Now, this is very interesting. So in that way, I personally have a clearer picture, so to say, so that I do not only base my knowledge on what comes on films to my telephone or what is in the media, but we have a feedback of the facts. What is happening? What was the first period of the revolution or of the protest, if you like, differed very much from what it became later. And indeed, we have not witnessed the exchange of one dictator with army dictator. That is a very good thing. And we are hearing from the interim government that they are requesting the United Nations team to come and check about the atrocities committed by the dictator and the regime which has gone, and the rights of the minorities were also emphasized. I hope, of course, it is very justified that your efforts to put the young women at the head of this new, which is being created in Bangladesh, will succeed. That you will manage to put the young women in the organization of the new structure of Bangladesh. Let me end this with the one saying of one of my friends who said about women. He said, "Women are the future of men." Oh, so remember, I guess this could be put also as a motto for Naripokkho. For at least I always repeat it: women are future of men. So remembering this and fitting this into what you have said, I really wish you all the best. Well, I'm glad, first of all, that we have met again. And wish you all the best and successes in your struggle, in your constant fighting for human rights, for the rights of women. And well, I'm sure Mr. Bartłomiej will give the thanks on behalf of all of us. So thank you for this information, for the knowledge which we have received from first-hand knowledge, not from media, not from the journalists, but for the person who is co-creating the events in the shape of future Bangladesh. Thank you very much, Mr. Bartłomiej.
Thank you. Thank you for giving me this opportunity.
Thank you for the summary, Mr. Moroń, and thank you, Mrs. Shirin, for providing this insight view on the current events in Bangladesh. And many thanks to our co-host, Katarzyna. Thank you very much for co-organizing this meeting, and thank you and goodbye.
Goodbye.
Thank you. Goodbye.